My family read my obituary at the funeral, but when I walked in alive, their lies collapsed, and the truth they buried came back to haunt them. I had no room left for fear. When someone has been buried alive by a lie, the only pain that remains is the silence they choose for themselves. And I, Abigail Callahan, had been silent long enough. On Monday morning, I walked into a lawyer's office in downtown Vancouver with a thick briefcase and a face void of emotion. The office was small, simple, but tidy. Sunlight filtered through the glass windows, landing on the file I brought with me. Every page a piece of my life, living proof that I never left this world the way they claimed. The person meeting me was attorney Jacob Miles, a young man in his early 30s, neatly cut brown hair, thin-framed glasses. As I opened my briefcase and laid each document across the table, he just sat there frozen, eyes wide and barely blinking. "This is my passport," I said, pushing forward the U.S. passport stamped repeatedly from Vancouver, Seattle, Toronto. "Here are my rental contracts, pay stubs, tax documents, and Canadian residency card." All dated during the same time Oregon officials listed me as deceased. Jacob flipped through a few pages quickly, then looked straight at me. "You're saying you were falsely declared dead?" I nodded. "And my family used that to transfer all my assets to my sister Emily Callahan. Not just my personal belongings, but also my grandparents' inheritance fund and some shares in the company I used to work for." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "I've never handled anything like this before." "I don't need you to be surprised," I replied, my voice strangely calm. "I need you to help me reclaim my identity and, if possible, hold the people who orchestrated this accountable." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "We'll start by filing a petition to revoke the death certificate. In parallel, I'll contact the Oregon state authorities and begin preparing a case for document fraud and inheritance abuse." But he hesitated. "This process won't be quick. It could take months." I looked up at him, my eyes steady. "I don't have months because they're holding a memorial for me this weekend." Jacob froze. "A memorial? They already held a funeral." "I know." I gave a bitter smile. "But apparently one fake funeral wasn't enough. They want a second performance, bigger, more public, and this time I'll be there to watch them act." That very night, I received a message from an unknown number. No name, no greeting, just a single line. "Memorial for Abigail Callahan. Sunday, St. Luke Church, Portland." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. St. Luke, the church where I once sang in the children's choir, where my parents used to take family Christmas photos every year. They chose that place to continue the lie. A sacred place full of memories now turned into a stage for their false grief. I stood by the window, city lights reflecting on the glass inside me. There was no anger, no doubt, only a cold clarity. I had been discarded, erased, replaced. But now I would return. Not to apologize, not to plead. I would return to reclaim the truth. I hired a freelance journalist who had reported on complex inheritance lawsuits. I gave her every document from the forged death certificate to the illegally transferred estate records. She promised to keep my identity confidential until the right moment to expose the truth. Berkey, I said only one thing. I'll give you that moment. Heber. I also had a long black coat, tailored, simple but elegant, not as a disguise, but to match the role I would play at the memorial, the one who returned from the forgotten. Heber. I wasn't sure who would attend that day. Relatives, old friends, people who turned their backs on me without a word. But I knew one thing for sure. They would never forget that day. Not because of the scripted eulogies, but because I would walk in at the moment they least expected and pull the curtain down, letting the light shine on the truth they had buried for 3 years. That morning, the sky over Portland was oddly gray. A light drizzle fell as if the city was bowing its head for something or someone. I stood across the small street looking at St. Luke Church, once a place of childhood memories. Now where my family would remember me again. Free, the church lights were glowing. Luxury cars lined the entrance. People dressed in perfect black attire entered with faces showing perfect sorrow. But I knew beneath that moral facade, no one truly grieved. I pulled my coat collar up, fastened the final button, and slowly crossed the street. Inside the service had already started. Through the slightly open door, I heard the choir singing Amazing Grace. The pure voices echoed through the sacred space, a perfect backdrop for the tragedy they wanted the world to believe. Obituary? As the song ended, a man stood. My father, Abigail. She was a complicated soul, he began, his voice slow but clear. She wasn't always easy to understand, but we loved her. We did everything we could. My mother sat below, lace handkerchief in hand, eyes red. She nodded gently with each word he said, as if memories were returning. But I knew this was just a scene from a script they had rehearsed well. I placed my hand on the heavy wooden door, took a deep breath, and pushed. The door opened with a long groan echoing through the church. Light from outside flooded in like a cold wind sweeping through the packed pews. Abraca murmurs rippled across the room. Some turned, some stared. Then one voice, choked in disbelief, broke the silence. "Oh my God, is that Abigail?" I stepped in, each stride slow but firm. The sound of my heels on the stone floor echoed like drum beats in their chests. I didn't look at anyone, didn't need to say anything. My presence alone was the answer to every question they had avoided for the last 3 years. As I reached the center aisle, the whole church fell into dead silence. My mother stood suddenly, lips trembling, eyes wide, then collapsed, her body limp in Aunt Margaret's arms. A perfect faint, perhaps rehearsed in her mind many times. My father stood frozen at the pulpit, eyes wide, lips moving but forming no words. The microphone slipped from his hand, landing with a sharp, dry thud on the sound system, and Emily, my sister, stood near the white flower arrangements, clutching a glass of red wine. When our eyes met, I saw it clearly. Fear. Real fear, not an act. Her hand shook so badly the wine spilled on her ivory silk dress. A red stain spread like blood across the fabric. I stepped onto the platform, stood exactly where they had just said goodbye to someone still breathing. I turned, faced the crowd, faces I never thought I'd see again. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need tears. I only needed the truth. "Eber, I heard I had died," I began, my voice steady, firm. "But as you can see, I'm still healed and ready to tell the truth." Eberson, no one spoke. Some sat frozen. A few phones began to rise, red recording lights blinking under the church's glow. Good. Let the world see. I opened the file I had prepared. This is my passport. These are my Canadian lease documents. These are my tax returns, my employment contracts. These are government documents proving I never died despite the death certificate someone submitted. I glanced down at my father, now sitting silently in the front pew, eyes fixed on the floor. I was falsely declared dead, erased from my family. And when I disappeared, all my assets were transferred to my sister. Inheritance funds, real estate, company shares, everything that once belonged to me. Emily tried to speak, but I raised my hand. Don't. Not now. You had 3 years to speak. Ibrahim. I looked around the church, meeting every eye. Friends, relatives, people who once claimed to care. They lowered their heads, unable to face me. "This isn't a memorial," I said, my voice deepening. "This is a performance. But unfortunately for you, today the audience has woken up and the curtain is about to fall." "Hey, bro." I closed the folder. My chest felt lighter. I didn't need to say more. I had come back, not just in body, but with a truth no one could deny. Abruk. I stood in the heart of St. Luke's Church, file in hand, my gaze cutting through the room like a blade. No more hymns, no more fake sniffles, only the suffocating silence of people dragged out of a dream they thought they controlled. I held up the documents, my voice sharp and deliberate, each word sinking deep into every soul in the room. There was no car accident in Spain, no highway collision, no brain trauma, and certainly no death of Abigail Callahan. I haven't left North America in 3 years. Everything you've just heard is a lie. Abraha gasps echoed from the back rows. I saw a young woman raise her phone, her camera light blinking. Then another, and another. The truth was being recorded, and this time they couldn't erase it. I turned, pointing straight at my father, who still kept his head bowed. "You signed the fake death certificate. You submitted it to the state of Oregon to legalize a death that never happened. All part of a plan to erase me. To erase a daughter who dared to speak the truth about the failures inside this family." My mother, now recovered from her staged collapse, gripped Aunt Margaret's hand tightly. Her face pale, her eyes wild as she looked at me like I was a ghost. "Abrahi and you?" I said, looking straight into my mother's eyes, my tone firm but calm. "You stayed silent. You knew the truth. You knew I did nothing wrong. But you let me take the fall and kept feeding the lie to protect Emily. I turned to Emily, my sister who once held my hand walking to school, who used to sleep beside me on Christmas Eve, now standing like a statue, fists clutching the stained hem of her dress, her flawless makeup beginning to smudge with sweat and tears. Obituary, you took money from the company, nearly $60,000. I knew. Our parents knew. But instead of owning up, you blamed me and they chose to erase me like I never existed. No one responded. No one dared. I took a deep breath, opened the second folder. Inside were copies of the death certificate, asset transfers, government-issued identity verifications from Canada, bank statements, all neatly arranged, stamped, signed, not speculation, evidence. I'll be submitting these to federal court and the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office. I continued. Forgery, financial fraud, exploiting a dead person to seize assets. And if you're lucky, Emily, maybe you'll get to keep a few pairs of shoes before selling everything to pay it back. Gasps erupted behind me. Aunt Margaret whispered, This can't be real. Obituary, I turned and looked directly at her. It's real. More than anything that's ever happened in this church. Obituary. At that moment, a man stood up. My Uncle Frank, my father's younger brother. He stepped forward, staring at me in shock. Abigail, no one called to check on me. Obituary, I cut him off. No one texted, no one emailed, one message won. But instead, you all stayed silent. And that silence makes you complicit. Obituary. I placed the final folder on the pulpit, gave a small nod. This is everything I need. The rest, I leave to the law. Obituary. I stepped down the stairs, walking the center aisle. Every eye followed me, some stunned, some averted, some still recording, following every step like a real documentary. When I pushed the church doors open, the afternoon light hit my face. I didn't look back. I didn't need to because behind me, the curtain of lies had fallen. And I knew from that moment forward, they could never put the play back together. The last light of the afternoon poured down the steps of St. Luke's Church. As I walked outside, the breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and the musty wood from the old saint statue by the yard, but I felt nothing except the relief spreading through me, light as if a stone had been lifted from my chest after 3 crushing years. Obituary, behind me, the church door hadn't yet closed. I heard the shuffle of feet, chaotic whispers, and someone crying. Maybe my mother, maybe Emily, but for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I didn't need to know what they thought, didn't need to hear whatever story they'd invent to justify what they'd done. What needed to be said, I'd said. What needed to be proven, I'd proven. The rest now belongs to justice. The next day, I sat in Attorney Jacob Miles's office, the marks from my heavy briefcase still faint on my hand. He carefully filed each document into labeled folders, nodding as he checked each seal and signature. Everything's in order, he said calmly. The petition to revoke the death certificate has been submitted to the state court along with lawsuits for document fraud, asset seizure, and false reporting. Obituary. I nodded, saying nothing. What I felt now wasn't triumph, it was release. Obituary. Jacob looked up at me. Not many people have the courage to face down their whole family, especially after what they've done. I smiled slightly. I didn't come back to be a hero. I just didn't want to be buried under something that wasn't true. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from the Oregon Department of Vital Records. The death status had been revoked, my identity fully reinstated. A simple name, Abigail Elise Callahan, was finally back in its rightful place in the system, no longer stamped deceased. The news spread faster than I expected. The church video was shared on social media, clipped into segments, going viral under the title, "The Woman Who Walked into Her Own Memorial and Exposed a Family Secret." Over 1 million views in just 3 days. People reached out to me, some with admiration, others with doubt, some reporters requesting exclusive interviews. I declined them all. I didn't want fame, I just wanted peace. The official investigation launched at the beginning of the next month. The Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office summoned my father, my mother, and Emily for questioning. Bank accounts were frozen, property transfers reviewed. What they once thought would stay hidden forever was now in the hands of the law. I didn't attend the first hearing. My lawyer said I had the right to, but I was too tired of the stares, the justifications, the cycle of false morality. Instead, I returned to Vancouver, the city that saved me when the world turned its back. I walked into the bookstore where I used to work and hugged the owner, Mrs. Ruth, the woman who once kept my first handwritten job application. "Ibra, you came back," she whispered, eyes glistening. "No, I never left," I replied. I rented a new apartment, smaller, quieter, with a balcony facing the river. Each morning I made coffee, watched the sunlight glimmer on the water, listened to soft classical music. No more nightmares, no more dreams of being chased by the past. I didn't return to forgive. I didn't need their late apologies because forgiveness is a gift and none of them deserved it. I came back to reclaim my right to exist, and for the first time in years I felt truly alive. My story isn't just about reclaiming an identity. It's a reminder that truth always matters, even when buried the deepest. In a world where someone can be erased with a lie, the most important thing is not to let yourself disappear from your own life. I didn't return for revenge or approval. I came back to prove that my existence is real and I deserve to live it on my own terms. What do you think about Abigail's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and unexpected family stories. I was just about to make coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in ages. Mrs. Helen Dorsey, our former neighbor from Oregon. My heart skipped a beat. Just seeing that name was enough to bring back a flood of memories I thought were long buried, crashing in like waves against a cliff. No greeting, no context, just a short message with a video attached. "Abigail, I truly can't believe what I saw today. My deepest condolences." I tapped the video, my palms already starting to sweat, though the coffee remained unmade. The frame opened to St. Mary's Church, the same one I used to visit every Christmas as a child. Every candle, every stained glass window looked exactly as I remembered, but the atmosphere was different, somber, reverent, chilling. The camera slowly moved toward the altar. My parents were standing there. My mother wore a black lace dress, her old pearl necklace around her neck, a white handkerchief dabbing gently at her eye. Beside her, my father quietly read from a piece of paper, his voice trembling but clear, and behind them was a casket. Next to it stood a large photo of me surrounded by white wreaths. "Abrer," they froze. "Abigail was always a troubled girl," my father said, his voice echoing from the phone as if it had exploded in my head. "But we always loved her. We did everything we could." I sat straight up, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My vision blurred, not from tears but from disbelief. I rewound the video. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't staged. Their faces were painfully real. But their eyes showed no grief. Not a single real tear fell. My mother added, "It's such a shame Abigail left this world so soon. We only hope she's found peace." I was alive, breathing, still paying rent every month, working at a small bookstore in Seattle, and yet, they held a funeral for me. I stared at the video, a chill crawling up my spine. This couldn't be a mistake. I hadn't gone missing, hadn't had an accident, hadn't experienced any major event that would lead people to think I was gone. This was intentional. I set the phone down, but my eyes didn't leave the screen. The pews were packed, everyone dressed in black. I recognized faces from childhood. My old piano teacher, the former gardener, even Uncle Roy, who hadn't left the state in over 20 years. Everyone believed I was dead. Not one person called to verify. No one messaged. Not a single question. I wasn't just erased from the family. I was buried alive. I slid down onto the kitchen floor, breath unsteady. The organ music from the funeral video still echoing in my ears. I kept replaying the clip like I was searching for a loophole, a sign that this was all a misunderstanding. But there was none. This was a story crafted, careful, deliberate. And at that moment, one thing became clear as sunlight streaming through a window. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. I used to believe that family was the one thing in the world that would never turn its back on you. That no matter how doubtful the world became, your parents would always be your foundation. But 3 years ago, that belief was shattered by a single, cold, merciless phone call. Back then, I was working at the architecture firm my family had founded in Portland, Callahan and Hart Design, where my father, Richard Callahan, was the CEO, and my mother, Judith, handled the finances. I was a project coordinator. Hardworking, discreet, never had any major missteps. Everything seemed fine until one day the end-of-quarter balance sheet turned into a nightmare. $63,000 had disappeared from the project operations fund. It wasn't enough to ruin the company, but it was enough to send everyone into a panic. I remember the emergency meeting clearly, my father holding the bank statement, his face heavy as stone. My mother said nothing, just looked at me like she already knew the answer. Burke Abigail, he said, each word weighed down. Is there something you need to confess to us? Hebersh. I stared at them, stunned. What do you mean? I didn't do anything wrong, but it was his next sentence that struck like a dagger. You're the only one with access to the internal code for that account besides your mother. You think we don't know that? My jaw dropped. Wait, you think I took that money? You really believe I could do that? Blurry silence. No one answered. Just a flicker of avoidance from the corner of the room. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, stood by the coffee machine, arms crossed, tapping her deep red nails against a ceramic mug. No defense, no support, just Aber, and then I understood. Emily was the one who did it. She'd only recently joined the finance department. My parents had always adored her, believed she was clever, charming, a natural in marketing. But I'd seen the strange designer shopping receipts in her drawer, the weekend spa trips with rich friends, things her salary couldn't possibly afford. Hey, bro. I stood up, turned to my parents. It was Emily, you both know it, you just don't want to admit it. My mother raised her head and looked me straight in the eye. Her voice was low, cold. We've had enough trouble already, Abigail, don't you see? One damaged child is better than 2 destroyed ones. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't just suspect me, they chose to cast me out to protect Emily. The next morning, I came back to my apartment and found my bank account frozen, my company email locked, voicemail full of messages demanding answers for embezzlement allegations. No official statement, no chance to explain, just gone. Brr. I tried reaching out to friends, colleagues. A few replied curtly. Most didn't respond at all. I messaged the aunt I was once close to. She replied with just one sentence. You should let this go. I became a ghost. No voice, no place. So I disappeared for real. I left Portland, left everything familiar. I moved to Vancouver, Canada, under my middle name, Abby Hart, and took a job at a small bookstore near the train station. There I was, just a quiet girl living in silence, no social media, no contact with anyone from before. And though I tried to move on, there were nights I lay awake, heart screaming with the unanswered question. Do they ever think about me? Regret it? But now, after watching that video, I had my answer. Not only did they not regret it, they held a fake funeral to tell the world I no longer existed. It's not that they didn't know I was alive. They chose to erase me from their lives, to protect my sister, to redistribute the inheritance, to eliminate the name Abigail Callahan from anything that might bring them shame. And they thought I'd never come back. They were wrong. I tried to forget. I told myself it was behind me, that I had survived the worst fall of my life. But life doesn't let you rest. It all started when I tried to recover an old email account, the one I used for job applications and paychecks back when I was in Portland. I needed to access a few old documents to complete my Canadian permanent residency application. A simple task. I thought it would take a few minutes. I typed in my username, entered the password, but the system threw an error. Account disabled. The account holder is deceased. I blinked. Read the message again. No way. I tried again, tried to recover it using my old phone number. Useless. The email had been permanently deleted due to an official death report from local authorities. I sat frozen in front of the screen, my heart pounding. Maybe it was a mistake, a technical error. I opened the Oregon Department of Vital Records website, typed my name into the search bar. Abigail Elise Callahan, born April 5, 1994, Portland. Recourse record popped up almost instantly. Name, Abigail Elise Callahan. Date of death, August 17, 2020. The cause, car accident in Spain. Status confirmed. No further verification required. Death certificate ID ORD 78F6193. I held my breath. I had never set foot in Europe, never applied for a visa, never bought a plane ticket to Spain, and yet I died. There I clicked download death certificate, a PDF opened complete with seals, ID numbers, and an electronic signature from a coroner confirming I died of a traumatic brain injury in a collision on a highway near Barcelona. It didn't sound right, but who needed a perfect truth anyway? My throat went dry as I read. I couldn't even blink anymore. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate fabrication. Someone had created my death with detailed information, context, even a specific location. And worse, they had fooled the government. Betrayal. I jumped out of my chair, my hands trembling. I pulled out my old personal file, U.S. passport, Canadian ID, health insurance card, rental contract in Vancouver, pay stubs, everything with clear dates from 2020 to now. Nothing showed I'd ever left North America, let alone died in Europe. I opened a map, zoomed in on the highway near Barcelona. The place listed as where I died, a small coastal town, population under 4,000, no U.S. embassy, no major hospital. The perfect place to stage something. The question looped in my mind like a broken clock hand. Who did this? Why go that far? This wasn't just about cutting ties or removing me from the family. This was about erasing me from the world. Then I remembered my mother's eyes when she said, "One damaged child is better than two." I no longer had any doubts. My parents, Emily, they planned this not just to erase me from their lives, but to benefit from my disappearance. I opened my laptop, logged into the Oregon State Property Management System, searched my name, and my heart dropped out of my chest. Every asset under my name, including the trust fund from my grandparents' life insurance and partial ownership in the company, had been fully transferred to Emily Callahan. Date: February 2021, 6 months after my death. This wasn't just personal betrayal, this was a massive asset transfer legally processed under my name. I sat in the dark. My tiny apartment suddenly felt colder than ever. Outside the window, Vancouver was settling into winter, light snow drifting down, but the chill in my chest was far worse. They buried me with the story. Now I had to dig myself out. I thought I had braced myself for everything, that nothing could surprise me after learning I'd been erased so blatantly. Then I opened Instagram. Not mine. That account had long been deleted. It was Emily's. She had just switched her profile from private to public, and the algorithm had accidentally pushed one of her posts into my search while I was looking up Callahan information. One tap, and the truth rushed into my eyes like an undertow. The first line in her bio took my breath away. Newlywed, living fully, loved by those who always believed in me. Emily's page was filled with photos from a lavish wedding in Charleston, South Carolina. Golden sunlight pouring over long white-covered tables, a towering crystal champagne display, heart-shaped floral arches among ancient oaks, golden lanterns, a shimmering mermaid-style gown, blush-toned bridesmaid dresses, all staged like a dream I was never invited to. I scrolled through every photo. In the middle, one image hit me like a punch. My father, Richard, standing next to the groom, holding a microphone beaming. The caption read, "For the daughter who always made us proud. Brooke." I reread it over and over. Not for me. The one who used to wake up early to make coffee for my mom, worked extra jobs to pay for college, stepped in at the office when staff was short. But for Emily, the one who stole money, spun lies, and then went on living like I'd never existed. Brooke. I kept scrolling. The next photo showed a hand with a massive diamond wedding ring. Below it, a thank you to our beloved parents for funding the entire wedding, including the new home they had just moved into in Lake Oswego, one of the most upscale neighborhoods in Portland. I reopened the property records, this time checking real estate ownership. That house had once been registered under my name by my father, part of an investment he promised to give me as a reward after I'd completed my MBA. Back then, I declined to take it right away because I wanted to earn it myself. Now it belonged to Emily Callahan Hart, legal owner, transferred 9 months after my death certificate was issued. I checked the linked bank accounts listed in the family inheritance disclosure. Once again, my name was gone, In its place was a brand new hyphenated name, Emily Elise Callahan Hart, listed as the sole beneficiary of the Internal Scholarship Fund, the joint investment account left by our grandparents, and even a life insurance policy I didn't know existed. I sat there numb, my whole body frozen. One thought began looping in my head. They didn't just replace me, they rewrote everything so I had never existed. I was once the designated heir. I was once chosen by my grandparents to hold the majority of the savings meant for future generations. I was once promised a managing partner role when my father retired. And now everything belonged to Emily. I didn't see a single photo of me. Not one mention, not even a wish she were here. Aunt Margaret, who used to send me Christmas cards every year, stood beside my mother, smiling. My cousin Dean was clinking wine glasses. The whole family, happy, joyful, as if I had never been one of them, and what crushed me the most was when I zoomed in on a photo taken during my father's speech. Behind him was a large screen showing the bride's life moments. I saw one image. I recognized it instantly. It used to be a photo of me at age 8, sitting in the backyard garden grinning. But it had been edited. My face had been replaced with Emily's. Sloppily done, but just convincing enough to fool an outsider. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased from history. Memories, assets, bloodline, all now carried Emily's name. And that's when I knew if I wanted my life back, I couldn't stay silent. They may have buried me in lies, but it's that silence I'll now use to awaken the truth.